Welcome back, dear friends, to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the city of demons. That's right, not Angel City of Demons, La La Land, or Hollywood, or I'm waiting for someone else to tell me what other names I could use when I'm talking about Los Angeles. And we are broadcasting on 107.7 FM, New Orleans, Louisiana, through UPRN, as well as Deprogrammed radio in the UK with terrestrial stations in London and Leeds and elsewhere. And of course, iHeartRadio and Spreaker and all the other affiliates that UPRN has, including Hong Kong, which is really cool. I knew we were international. I always see that in the chat from people talking, say, representing Belgium here or, Australia there. But Hong Kong, I gotta say, that's pretty darn cool. Now, today, it's been 3 years since I brought back this guest, partially since I was off air for 20 months, but now I'm glad to have brought him back on. This is a medical doctor, Dr. Richard Boylan. He really doesn't need much of an introduction for all of those who pay attention to not just UFOs and ETs, but star kids and star seeds and all of the above. And I was just about to say this before, and actually I just did before we came on air. The only way we're ever going to find out what the beings, the visitors, want, or how they act, or what they look like, or what they smell like, or all of that, or what the insides of the ships look like, is by talking to those who have had contact. Many of them are not human initiated contact, but are taken whether through close encounters of the fourth in kind, which is abductions, but sometimes people want contact and then they're taken. So I don't know if you want to call that close encounters 4.5, because yeah, humans want it. I'm one of those. I'd love to be taken, but I've yet to be taken. So without further ado, Dr. Boylan, welcome back, dear friend.
Thank you, Dr. J. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure to speak to you, and you've been involved with this for a long time, man. When did you start getting involved with dealing with people who are star seeds and star kids?
Well, it goes back a ways. I spent a career as a professional psychologist, and in the course of that, later on in my career, I started to get interested in talking with people who said that they had had a close encounter with an extraterrestrial. So I encouraged people to come in and tell their story, and I used all my professional skills. I could sort out the few people that were just making it up as they go, but most people were terribly sincere. And this was back in the late 1990s when this subject was even more taboo and looked down on by the majority of the population than it is now. And so these people went to some great risk to themselves to tell their account of how they had engaged in by the extraterrestrials. I'll
40,
take one.
30, 40, 50 years ago, they were ridiculed. I mean, I can't even say to the extent of ridicule that the debunkers really wanted to shame them. But all they're doing is telling the truth. Most of them are still harboring the secret, and when they do talk about it, they're not trying to sell a book. They don't want their lives disrupted, but something is happening to them. Many times causes PTSD, which as a clinical therapist and medical doctor, and you also have been involved in hypnotherapy, regressing a lot of these memories.
Yes. Um, because during these encounters, very often, the person, well, a number of them have the kind of encounter where they know somebody came in the room, if you will, and they were taken, but they can't remember the details. So I have found that using hypnosis breaks through any memory blocks they have, and the rest of the story comes tumbling out. And I ask them to tell me as the rest of it comes out in their head, so I can benefit from what they're discovering too. Now, I've interviewed over 1,000 people who've had close encounters, and taking careful notes, written a book on it for that matter. And these are striking experiences. I don't think anybody has a close encounter and just shrugs it off and wonders how the football game will be next weekend. This is a big deal. And so over the last decades, I've worked with people who've had these close encounters, and I've learned that for a number of them, their lives and their bodies are changed. And many of them go on to have kids after this close encounter, and the kids are different. They're more advanced. I was intrigued by this. And I learned that when these people had an encounter, often enough, the star visitors did some influencing of their body, particularly their reproductive material, and upgraded it genetically so that the child they later had was more advanced, grew up faster, smarter, more intuitive, psychic abilities were there, etc. So I've coined the term star seeds, star kids for the kids for the kids, and the grown-ups who've been changed in this way, I call starseed adults. So we have a phenomenon here of not just a star visitor from another planet coming up and shaking the hand and having the time of day, but this is transformative. And not only are these people changed afterwards, but very often their children are changed by when they're born by being genetically more advanced.
You know, Dr. Roger Lear, before he passed away, I don't know if it was him who coined the term, but he told me of the new, what Homo sapiens are evolving to, which is Homo noeticus. And he talked about that the children, especially children of those who have had, abductions and may have had children with ETs, are so much more advanced. Their intelligence is up through the roofs, and as you mentioned, the psychic abilities that people have just by being engaged with these non-terrestrial beings.
That's right. I could rattle off a few of them if you would like.
Absolutely.
All right, let me get over to the star kids here. Some of the things they end up being is telepathic. They often can kind of sense what's going to happen next without it knowing it ahead of time. The more talented among them can move objects by mental force alone. They can have sensitive communication. For example, some of these star kids can tell you what their pet is trying to say with their mewing or their barking. And sometimes they just go into the pet's mind, and if they know that the pet is feeling sick, they can tell a parent, he's not feeling so well. Let's take extra care of him. The other abilities, they can see auras around people. We all have an energy field around us, and most regular humans just don't know about it, don't particularly pay attention to it. but the star kids can see it or feel it, depending on which way their sensitivity goes, and it tells them something about the person, how aware they are, just that they're more advanced because their auras stick out a lot farther from their body than the energy field of a regular human. They can do psychic healings at times. Sometimes they can make themselves practically invisible, where people don't notice they're there even though they are there. They can move an object from one place to another. Sometimes they can use their minds to influence somebody to do something they would like. And I tell Star Kids when I give a Star Kid workshop now, no fair mentally influencing your mother to give you a second helping of dessert. That's not a right use of the power. But these kids can do things like that. They like to work with healing the earth, too. They're very sensitive to earth and its energy field, and when things are out of order, disrupted, as they so often are with the environmental disasters we're having these days, they're very touched and try to do healings of that. And they try to do healings of humans when they come across someone who's in a bad way. There are other abilities too, but this will give a sample of the kinds of new kind of child and new kind of grown-up starseed adult that is now coming in and among us. I kind of call them human 2.0. So these visits with the star visitors open up a whole new level of extraterrestrial human interaction. It's not just small talk, but changes are going on, and we as the human race are slowly growing up.
Now, when you mentioned the ability to talk with their animals, right, or communicate, that right there implies to me telepathy. And in all honesty, I always thought that that's what we're meant to have. If you think about the way we speak, what do? We have thought, which is lightning speed. I mean, beyond lightning speed. We have to slow that thought down and put it into a words, and then a cluster of words becoming a sentence, and then having those words come out of our, from our brain into our mouth and then spoken. I don't think we were ever really meant to speak the way we do. And for that matter, when you are just speaking, you also have this facade where you're hiding so much about you. If you go back thousands of years ago, the Tower of Babel, Dr. Roger Lear told me this story that we did have the powers of telepathy. Something happened that we may have upset the gods, which other people say is just ETs that were visiting us, that caused us to start speaking with our mouths, hence speaking in tongues. So when you read that version in the Bible that talks about the Tower of Babel, if you go back before that, I think that all of us were telepathic because we are meant to communicate with every living being on this planet, whether it be our dogs, our cats, or anything. And they show emotions, and we should do much more than just seeing what their emotions are of, purring on a cat or a dog being happy. We should be able to understand more through telepathy. And if we had telepathy, not only are we able to communicate with our pets and all beings, we're going to get so much more from their minds of what they're really feeling in every second of the way. And I also heard that telepathy doesn't even have a range.
That's true. It is down at the quantum level. it is one of the ways that extraterrestrials communicate too, star visitors with each other, because you can send a thought across the galaxy practically instantaneously. Now, there's no force we know of that can go that fast. It doesn't even end up being a matter of going fast. It kind of skips under the 3D levels of things to a quantum level and pops back up at the destination point. So it's an instantaneous, non-physical, if you will, form of communication. My acquaintance Standing Elk, Native American, well, you could call him medicine man, told me a story that among the Sioux, the Lakota, they tell that back a long time ago, communication was pretty much telepathic, and they would just use one or two words to kind of signal the general territory, and the rest of it was filled in telepathically. And as the native peoples got into modern times, with all the white man coming and all the distractions of modern equipment and development, they kind of lost that ability and had to use speech as the main carrier of their communication. But it's interesting, they used to be much more telepathic when they were in earlier, more simple times.
Now,
I want to...
go ahead.
I wanted to get, before we go too far down the road, into the matter of star visitors on Earth here, and I have a personal story to tell about that too.
I'm glad you did, because that was what I was just going to ask you about, them walking amongst us on this Earth, on this plane.
We must be telepathic. How about that, Dr. J? All right, great minds go down the same avenue. Yes. The close encounters aren't just a matter of star visitors in a spaceship coming over into our atmosphere and a scout craft coming down with one or two or three of them and landing and walking over and how do you do? I mean, that's one way of engagement. But there are residential populations on Earth of star visitors. Some rather recent and some that go back quite a ways. For example, among the what we used to call the well, we call them now the Sami, but they used to be Laplanders was the term, up above the Arctic Circle. They came from a planet near Barnard's star, a planet that is quite cold, and they think nothing of cold. That's the normal temperature for them. They settled here on Earth up above the Arctic Circle where it suited them just fine. Hardly any humans choose to live that far north because it's pretty darn cold, but they're happy. They've done a little intermarrying and mingling with Europeans, and but mostly they are an identifiable race unto themselves. One of the ways, subtle ways in which we know they're different than us is they have fewer teeth than we do. Not a question of falling out, it's just genetically they don't produce quite as many teeth. I think we have like 32 and they have 28, something like that. I'm doing this from memory. So that was noted when scientists studied them. Another race that is among us and has been since before the covered wagon days in American history are the tall whites.
That's right. Yeah,
Uh,
Charles White talked about them at was it Area 52 or 54? I'm not quite sure, but yes, he absolutely talked about them in his books, Millennial Hospitality, which he said he would never have written had it not been for his grandchildren, so he could have a memory of what he did when he was working with them.
he had one of the most unusual assignments a U.S. airman ever had. His officers told him to go way out on the desert range and float a few weather balloons and see what the weather directions were. But their real purpose, they knew the tall whites were living in what we would call the valley above Indian Springs, Nevada, on the Nevada test side of the fence. They were there, and the military knew they were there, and they weren't bothered. And so Charles Hall worked among them. He eventually kind of befriended them, and they tolerated him. And so he wrote these very illuminating books about his experiences with them. And they come from some distance, and they're settlers from another star system, and they just mind their own business, and so everything is cool, as is true with the Sami, the Laplanders too. They're pleasant people, easygoing, and very close to nature. A third group that just arrived a couple years ago is, let me get over here to, this is a civilization from a star system that is dying. And the nature of stars when they're dying is things just get wilder and wilder in their cores. Eventually they kind of blow up in supernova.
That's right.
Any planets circling them don't do very well in such a situation.
They decimate. Yeah, I mean a supernova would decimate that solar system that of those planets that are, orbiting it.
Right. So their science is sufficiently advanced that they knew this was coming, and so they reached out to some authorities on Earth. I was one of the people they talked with, and they talked with NSA and CIA officials because contact by star visitors is highly classified, and they can't just walk down the street and talk to anybody that comes along. But there are officers within the NSA and CIA that are cleared for extraterrestrial matters, so they talked to them. They took a poll, and the poll was whether the representative sample of NSA and CIA officers felt it would be okay for this a refugee civilization of 3 million people to come to Earth and pick some out of the way spot and just keep out of people's way, but come settle here where it's safe and be out of harm's way when the star finishes blowing up. So that happened, and they came here, and I'm trying to get the date here. I was there when they landed. I was in some dialogue with them in the Southwest, and saw their first ship come in and kind of materialize. They were cloaked, but they materialized at the base of this sandstone butte. And then after they reconnoitered a while, they picked a different place to permanently locate. And they created a underground base in southern Utah, I'll say that much, and at 5,000 feet altitude. and it's about a mile and a half by a mile and a half underground. And these folks just live there very quietly and keep out of people's way, and are very happy to have a nice, pleasant planet like Earth, and our sun that is in no danger of going supernova anytime soon. And so this is an example of a, shall we say, an interplanetary peaceful helpfulness where they got welcomed in and settled and mind their business, and everybody's good. This happened, let me get the date here, May 1st, 2016. 8 large ultramarian space vessels landed in the U.S. Southwest between Capitol Reef National Park and Glen Canyon National Recreation Area. In other words, in the picturesque sandstone area of southern Utah.
I'm
So
picturing like Monument Valley when you're saying, picturesque area of Utah.
That's not so far away from where they ended up. They did not end up in Monument Valley, but that's not so far away from where they did end up. I'm not going to give the exact coordinates. I don't think they're ready for visitors at the time. I have, however, sent word to my contacts to talk with government that I'd like to see their settlement made a UNESCO cultural heritage site. In other words, something for everybody in the world to know about and appreciate and feel good about, offering this kind of hospitality and smooth race relations, interracial relations, if you will, at a cosmic level, not just different ethnic groups on Earth, but one star civilization welcoming and sheltering another refugee star civilization. And I think that merits UN recognition, but I don't think that's taken place yet.
Let me ask you, with star seeds, this is something that was asked before we even started broadcasting. Someone asked if star seeds are akin or are indigo children, just the name is different in another country.
No, indigo children is some kind of in my view, a distortion, not a very accurate description of what star kids are like. Some of the New Ager types like to invent these labels and whip up stories, but I've looked at that. I don't think it's a very good, accurate description of star kids. And I've done some lengthy, multi-decade scientific research on the subject, as have a number of other therapist colleagues of mine. And we've developed a good idea of what they're all about. And so I'm going to stick with star kids and star seed adults.
Of course. That's what you do a lot of your research on. That's even in your bio, too.
Yeah. So, as for star visitors, close encounters, the half an hour long contact, maybe. It's often in a person's bedroom at night, versus residential extraterrestrial populations living on Earth. Those are two forms of the way we interact with each other. The bottom line of all of this is I wish to hell the government would declassify this and go public with what they know, because these are wonderful experiences, and if the mystery got drained out of this and it just became matter of fact, then I think we as a human population would do a big step forward in growing up and realizing we're not alone in the universe, and there's other folks, and most folks are very peaceable. They're not all that. They're like us. They may look a little different, but it would be very helpful for good relations among peoples of the galaxy.
Now, let me ask you about remote viewing. I would think that some of these star kids, if they have powers like telepathy, remote viewing would also come naturally.
Yes, I've done workshops with star kids and star seed adults, and one of the things we do, it's not like any class you ever took, I don't think, is we save a few minutes to try and do a sample remote viewing, have everybody sit around in a circle, and we pick a target place or situation and have people remote view it, and then we pick one where it's possible to get information actually from the site, and then compare it with what people picked up with just using their mental powers without looking or knowing anything else. And it's interesting. It's real. Some people are fuzzy, and a few people just didn't quite get it right, but you could tell everybody was picking up on something, and so this stuff is real. Now, there are experts, if you will, in the military and intelligence communities. There are programs where they try to cultivate remote viewing. And the CIA had a project that taught people how to remote view and get better at it, get stronger at it. And when they finally got strong enough, they gave them assignments like, I want you to go with your mind, reach up over to Russia, over to Moscow, over to the Kremlin. And I want you to go into the KGB headquarters building and go into their file cabinet. And I want you to look at some document in there and tell me what you see. You know, this is espionage at a very psychic level. No airfare involved, no breaking down doors, picking locks, just reaching with your mind and picking up information halfway around the world. People think this stuff's a bunch of hooey. Well, I'll tell you what, your tax dollars have been spent in millions of them perfecting this activity with people who showed some talent in this department. So it's real. And it teaches us that the world is not just our five senses. It's more than that. And we can engage with reality with more than just sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. We can engage mentally and by intuition, by feeling energy fields, by feeling vibration. There are many ways that we can be alive and engaged with people and things besides the old classic stuff that we learned in school.
It's true. And you know what I always say about school is that too is linear teaching. You know, if schools did what the rich people can afford to do for their children and actually nurture what they're good at, so say if a child is good in math or literature or even music or sports, nurture that. Instead, what do we have that you went through, that I went through, all the way up getting through our doctorates, even though you got a medical doctorate, I got a Juris doctorate. The point is we had to go through the same thing that everyone else did. What good does that do when you find a child is not so good at something and chances are may not ever improve on that? Why not focus on what the people can or kids can do best and make them be the best they can be instead of, maybe destroying their emotions by shoving this information down their throats that they are not good at?
Yeah, well, I one of my degrees is in education. I've heard many discussions where educators go round and round about, do we open their mouths and shove information in, or do we allow them to do their own exploring? And often that makes the kids retain it a lot better if they explore it themselves and get into things. I think that's what you're saying too. There's a whole school of thought that, if the kids are self-directed more, they tend to hang on to it better.
Very well agreed, and you know what? That's been proven time and time again. I have the first question here for you. This is from Lasha Senyak. Do do the abilities of star kids get more intense as they grow up, like a talent?
Well, if it's cultivated, we have the problem that the UFO cover-up and the policy of ridicule that has gone on for decades around this whole subject. Some people get so intimidated by that even though they have abilities, they just bury them and never look at them, never try to use them, and just hope people won't think they're different. But the braver ones that recognize they have abilities and use them do get better with it. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the better and stronger it gets.
Very well said. Very well said. Let me ask you this. All through your life, you've been told that we are going to have disclosure. And I know Stanton Friedman, or may he rest in peace, and all the others that have passed away in the years. And I know even before my time, you've really actually had a lot more people that you've crossed paths with that have passed away. But they had the school of thought that the presidents, even Grant Cameron has changed his ways. He used to always focus on the White House and the presidents, and that we would get this huge announcement on the White House lawn, and says, just so you know, we'd like to let you know that we have these intergalactic or interstellar beings that are visiting us. They can come in and out of our airspace, and we can't detect it, we can't do anything about it. By the way, they're taking some of you against your will, and we just thought we'd let you know. I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Well, the taking against the will part is not accurate. That's kind of disinformation program that the people in the UFO cover-up also throw out there to make people frightened and run away if they see a UFO. But disclosure is not going to come from the White House. I've been working with at a level where I know the proper authorities for this matter are. The UFO matter is basically a UN matter. I've talked with Star Nations, the Star Visitors organization that represents all of them, and they want to speak to the organization on Earth that represents all of us humans, and that would be the United Nations. They don't want to talk to one country at a time. There are 175 or 6 of them. They want to talk to UN. And when formal dialogue goes on, it's going to be with the UN president. The other organization that is secret, multinational, transnational, is the MJ12 committee. My friend Michael Wolff, Dr. Michael Wolff, is on that. That is a committee that has been set up by the nation with representative members from various nations that steers policy about how Earth and humans will deal with the UFO subject. They debate among themselves whether it is time or not to go open about the fact that star visitors are real, UFOs are real, some of them are among us, and we all ought to just settle down and face the fact the universe is much bigger than we thought. Those two committees, and I'm trying to put some feelers out to talk to the leadership of the General Assembly of the UN and the MJ12 committee. That's where the green light is going to come from. And that's the way Star Nations want it too. They don't want to play favorites and say, we think the U.S. is the nicest country, so we're going to have them make the announcement. Or we think Costa Rica is a nice, peaceful country, we'll let them do the announcement. No, they do want to play favorites. They want to deal in a dignified, diplomatic way, one civilization with another. And their Star Nations organization that represents all of them would like to speak to the United Nations, which represents all of us. And efforts have been made, but to date, their leadership has not stepped forward yet, but we continue to try.
It's all we can do, unfortunately, is to continue to try. And at the same time, someone said this to me, and I'm wondering if there's, a lot of sense to it. If you've noticed, a lot of people are starting to talk more about consciousness. Even, like I mentioned, Grant Cameron, who stopped talking about the nuts and bolts of what presidents know and is now having, I believe, not one but two groups that he deals with, basically like what Yvonne Smith does with her Zero group, has people in his local area that have been abductees or contactees, and lets them just talk amongst each other, and is there because for him it came because of a download. And so this other new thought that someone brought to my attention was, what if the early, say, days of UFOs, I'm talking about not, thousands of years ago or even 100 years ago, but let's just say right after World War II, Roswell era, the 50s, the 60s, when you had the 52 flyover DC twice. What if that was them to say, okay, look, here's the light show that we're here, and then they started to recede a little bit and are letting us grow up spiritually to catch up to them? What do you think about that statement?
Yeah, that's pretty well been established. In 1952, General Eisenhower, who was president of the United States at that point, received an invitation to go out to the desert, Mojave Desert, and meet with representatives from an extraterrestrial civilization. And he got a few officials together and went out there. And they engaged in conversation for some time. And the short version of it was that the star visitors said, it's time, Mr. President, to tell the people of the world. At that point, the U.S. had just won World War II and was seen as the most powerful country on Earth, and so they dealt with them at that point and said, you tell your people, and obviously word will spread, that we're here and we come in peace. And Eisenhower said, no, things are too raw and ragged. We just got through with a World War II, terrible war. And people don't need any more big shocks right now. They need to kind of settle down and let us slowly piecemeal it to the public. And the star visitors said, okay, well, all right then. We'll let you have some time. You work on getting your public ready for this. Well, that was over a half century ago, 70 years ago, and time's up. We're now at a point where the Navy, U.S. Navy, their flyers are going on camera and saying that they've had UFOs on their gun cameras, radar, engaged, they're saying all this for attribution, putting their rank and name and career on the line in front of public television, that this stuff's real, these engagements are real, it's 3D solid, it's not somebody's imagination, it's not swamp gas. These are really craft that can dance circles around us technologically, but they're real. So I think we're getting close to there. But, man, I sure hate the slow pace of all this.
Here's a few questions for you. Let me go back to the first one here so I make sure I ask them in order. This is from Rockstar. Do aliens reproduce like we do?
Well, very few of them have the external genitals that we do. Their bodies are shaped differently, and there's not been a whole lot of conversation about reproduction. I guess the star visitors, when they're engaged with us, have other things they think are more important to talk about. But obviously they reproduce and have children, and anatomy differs from race to race and from star system to star system. So it's hard to make any big generalizations. But as with all other species, the job gets done, and it's generally a contribution from male and female, and the race is perpetuated.
Now, here's another question for you. This is one of a few from Pam Brettenberg, who is my social media manager, and I'll plug in her website later, but I'll do it right now. For all you folks, remember United Truth Seekers is run by Pam. Okay, are star children kids like on the fringe that were given drugs and now have powers?
No, their psychic abilities, their genetic advancement has nothing to do with taking psychedelic drugs. It's natural. It's inborn. It's a result of a genetic upgrade, different, more sophisticated genes. Of course, as a psychologist, I've worked with people who've taken psychedelic drugs, and their imaginations are enhanced, and their ability to see things differently are enhanced. But that's not psychic stuff. That's just hallucinations or mental impressions created by powerful chemistry going on in the brain. That's not at all what psychic abilities are. Psychic abilities are very fine, delicate, sensitive abilities to sense things and to engage with other things, in some cases with other things' energy fields, and read them, pick up information, and sometimes influence other people's energy fields. This is nothing to do with psychedelic hallucinations. So they're two different things, really.
Now, this is from Lasha Senyak. Star kids are telepathic, so do they automatically sense each other or recognize each other?
That's an excellent question. Let me rephrase that the way I use words about that. Star kids almost always are telepathic, and but they're also what we would call empathetic or empathic. They can feel another person at an energetic level, not reach over and touch their skin, but just feel their energy, their mind, their emotions, even before the person opens their mouth, tell them how they're feeling. And so they very often can sense a fellow star seed in the room or a fellow star kid in the room. When I did my Star Kid workshops, uh, if somebody came in late who was a star kid or a star seed, people turn around, they kind of feel that energy coming in the room. So it's real.
Now, this is two questions by Pam, so I'm going to group them together. First part is, what do star children do with their time? And the second, what's the difference between a star kid and a star seed?
Well, I'll take the second one first. Star kid is obviously a kid, a juvenile. Star seed, I use that term to describe grown-ups. You can't call a 30 or 50-year-old guy a star kid. They act as being kids. So it's just an adult term for a star seed. And kids we call, you could say a star seed child, but we use star kid as kind of a shorthand for that. Now, as for what do star kids do with their time, they're in many ways normal kids like any other kids. They go out and play and study and do homework and have hobbies, and, collect bugs or go on hikes and whatever.
Play video games.
Watch games.
These days, yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. The fun thing, though, being a star kid, I asked a couple of them, you ever play pinball? Yeah. Have you ever tried to influence the way the ball goes with your mind so that you get a better score? Kids get sheepish.
Telekinesis.
Maybe one or two of them will say, yeah, I did that a time or two. Bingo. There we are.
There's your answer.
So they're like other kids except 2.0. They have a few little extra things they do.
Okay, let's see what's next here. Philip Blair, how can we make contact?
Well, you can try, and I'll tell you some ways we found work as well as anything's going to work. The thing you have to realize is one has to approach this with a great deal of humility. The idea of, hey, I'm curious. I'm going to whistle down the next UFO that goes by and tell them to land, and I don't want to open the door. I want to walk up and let's shake hands and meet. Well, often the star visitors have other things to do besides land and for the amusement of a given individual. Number two, there are still plenty of folks in government and in these secret organizations that don't like star visitors here, who are trying to shoot them down and capture them and torture them and kill them. So the idea of just buzzing along and landing for your amusement and making small talk is literally asking, in many cases, people to take their lives and the lives of their crewmates and their ship at risk. So it's not a small thing. All of that said, still, people do have some successes with reaching out and asking for a visit. And one of the ways, there's no one single way it works, but one of the ways, no surprise, is to use telepathy. I would give you a sample here. A person goes to a quiet place where there's not a lot of traffic and buzz and distraction and noise. Get into kind of a quiet, almost meditative frame of mind. Then we form the thought of, I'm a good person. I'd like to meet a star visitor and treat them with respect and invite them to come and manifest themselves and say hello. And just put that thought out there, and one has to stay with it and peacefully persist for some time. No guarantees, and you can spend a lot of time. Some people do what we call star watches at night when things are quiet. And you spend a lot of time, and you have to be patient, and very often, apparently, nothing happens. But it has happened. I've seen it at some of our Star Kids Star Seed workshops where, there'll be a light in the sky that moves in a way that isn't a plane or anything else, and gets a little closer and stands still for a while, then gets a little closer and stands still for a while. And sometimes it comes right overhead. Now, in the workshops, we've never had a craft actually land per se being called in, but we have had situations where people have called them in, like the light got closer, and then that night they had an encounter while they were in bed. So it's not exactly the way people think, where you kind of whistle them down and they land and you stick your hand out, hi, I'm Joe, who are you? There are different ways it happens, but if you reach out respectfully, kindly, in a friendly way, sometimes that gets rewarded.
I don't know how to pronounce this username, so I'm going to try. It's Jack Repalier. I hope that said that right. How come none of them tell what's the name of their species?
Well, I don't know that you can say none do, because we do know the names of some of the star visitor races. But we have the problem of they have their name, and
we have ours.
Sometimes they give, well, people have made up names, and they're not necessarily going to go with that, although they kind of reluctantly go with Zeta because it's so popular for one of the races. But they're not so much more interested in race names anyway. They're very sensitive, telepathic folks, and they figure if you engage your mind with my mind, you get an imprint of what I'm like. You don't need a race name or so forth, and we're all a little different. So, but in some cases, people have given names, and frankly, the sounds they make are difficult to reproduce. Don't neatly fit with the way our languages go. So sometimes humans just end up kind of making something that gets as close as they can get to what they thought they heard. So it's not an exact science, and frankly, it's not so important because people are best understood by the way they behave, and people develop relationships, and that's what really counts.
Here's another one for you. This is from another question from Lasha. Do starseeds report having different dreams than most of us, more vivid or more predictive, maybe?
Well, star kids could have regular dreams, and they can have dreams that seem to involve some of their psychic abilities, and they can have dreams that seem to involve a star visitor coming into their field of consciousness and influencing them, having a kind of communication. And sometimes the communication is not words, it's images. And a person will get images, and they say, I don't think I thought that up. That's in my head. And I developed the conclusion that someone is putting it in there, and that's a form of communication.
Lars Saturn wants to know, what's the difference between star kids and black-eyed kids?
Well, I'm not familiar with black-eyed kids per se. If you're talking human kids, and there's a lot of myths, mostly made up by ultimately by the people who are trying to run either UFOs don't exist or they create scary stories about the star visitors, so people will be scared off and keep their distance. In the science, I'll call it science fiction literature, there's some talk about some kids with dark eyes, but those are not regular humans. There are certain star visitor races that have black eyes, in the sense there's no whites like we have whites of our eyes. The whole eyeball is black from one end to the other. That's the way it goes, particularly in star systems where the light is low, where a star is faint. A race will evolve that needs as much light capturing eye structure as possible. And so a black eye that's totally absorbing of light would be more useful in such a dim planetary world. So we see people, star people, with varying degrees of different colors of eye, different eye structure. Some have totally, like the Tamarians have totally dark eyes. And the tall whites look like us, except they're, where we have whites in our eyes, it's all black.
And they apparently turn pink as they age, is what Charles Hall said.
Well, he's had more experience with them than I have, so I can't comment. I've had very little contact with this tall white, so I can't say what happens when they get old, but I'll take Charles' word for it. He seems like a very careful observer.
Here's another one for you from Pam. Can star kids or star seeds heal us humans?
Excellent question. Yes, one of their abilities, and some have it to a generous degree, some have it very lightly. And again, it's one of those abilities, if you work on it and use it, meditate and focus, summon your energy, you can get better over time. But yes, I've seen star kids talk about healing their pet or healing somebody in their family. We had a situation. We usually do in our Star Kids RC workshops a healing ceremony just on general principles so everybody gets some practice. Usually in a large crowd, somebody's got something going on, sprained your leg or, something sore, heated up, twisted or something. And we gather in a circle and everybody gets very focused, meditative, calm, and summoning inner energy, healing energy and intention and purpose, mental focus, and send healing energy to that person. And you get 30 people around you sending healing energy. Most people who have been on the receiving end say they feel a little better after it's all over. That's just a kind of quick 5 or 10 minute demonstration stuff. So yes, this stuff's real. these are abilities that we need to appreciate, to respect, use carefully, and use. If we have them and somebody's over there hurting, why not do
Heal
a little
them.
healing?
Amen. I agree to that. Philip Blair asks, have they always been visiting, and how long have they been coming? Basically the same question,
Oh,
two ways.
well, you asked a $64,000 question. Let me give you the short history of the human race and star visitor interaction. A long time ago, before humans existed, star civilizations, they have a practice of roaming the galaxy, and when they see a planet that looks like it could support life, particularly intelligent life, meaning, it's a variety of species on that planet and been around a while. Evolution has brought up higher levels of development. They keep an eye on it because it could end up supporting intelligent life, and when they find that planet with intelligent life on it, they want to reach out, engage, and help things along and let them know that they're there too. Being friendly neighbors, if you will. Well, with Earth, these Star Nation reconnaissance patrol ships, sort of like if you borrow from Star Trek, their vessel cruises different star systems looking for intelligent civilization. That's not a bad model for what Star Nations volunteer groups do with some regularity. And one of these exploratory parties encountered Earth and saw that primates had developed here, and they showed some level of intelligence, greater intelligence than many animals. And they decided to watch that, and they watched as the primates, the great apes and lemurs and others, continued to evolve in more sophisticated ways. We would consider them very primitive, but compared to iguana, I guess you would have to say they were more evolved and developed. And at a point about, well, let me back up a little. So they started working with a little bit of genetic assist to kind of speed up development of intelligent life. So they got some of these primates and worked with their genes and improved the genes for intelligence and put them back in the animal and went on to watch and see what happened. Well, these enhanced primates turned out to be more and more developed. Some of our anthropologists, scientists, have started giving names to the remains they found, archaeology of things like Lucy, primates that showed relatively larger brain case and signs of more developed intelligence. And they and then the star visitors did a little more genetic tinkering, and about 275,000 years ago, the last genetic tinkering produced Homo sapiens. And they watched how this effort turned out. And Homo sapiens was fairly bright, much more than the general primate or monkey population. But they were still had a lot of animal in them. They're very aggressive, territorial. So they let that go on for about 100,000 years. And then they decided to upgrade a little more. And they got to Homo sapiens sapiens, modern human. Well, this was brighter and able to do a number of things, develop language, symbolism, and signs of, tool making and other signs of using brain to operate life at a higher level than the animal. And this went on for about 100,000 years, and we get up to modern times. And what happened is that the evolution of humans and their use of the enhanced intelligence was much more focused on physical and aggressive things. Probably the ultimate example of misuse of intelligence and smartness would be the creation of the atomic bomb and the use of that bomb to destroy 2 cities during World War II.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yeah.
Bingo. At that point, the star visitors said, whoops, the recipe needs a little more work. We can't have this going on. So they, skipping forward a few decades, but not too far after this, they started working with engaging humans, borrowing some cheap genetic material, Ova or Stephen, upgrading the genetics in there and putting them back in the human. And in short, I'm going to telescope a number of decades here, but in short, what happened in that process was Homo sapiens 3.0, what I call star kids and starseed adults. And that is the situation we are at now, where a little less than half the planet is Homo sapiens human 2.0, and about half the planet and a little better is now Homo sapiens 3.0, star kids and starseed adults. And as time goes on, the star kids and starseeds, of course, reproducing themselves will eventually become the whole population of humans on Earth. But we're kind of in the transition zone, so we see signs as we look around us. Some people and some kids have these extra special abilities and operate in a more advanced way. They're not just psychic sideshows. These kids are also more sensitive, spiritual care, loving, caring at a higher developed way than the old-fashioned human used to be. And half the population are still old-school humans. So we're in a transition, but we're headed towards a star kid, star seed dominant human race. That is kind of a lengthy answer to your question, but it shows a fairly representative anecdote about how intelligence develops and how the star nations help things along when they see the conditions are right. They see a high degree of developed intelligence as a wonderful gift and a blessing, and like to see conditions created for it to flourish.
You know, after we dropped those bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even after the Trinity test, which I believe was it May of 45, the way Stan
So,
Friedman put it is that we sent off this domino effect, an infinite domino effect, after we divided an atom in a nuclear explosion, sending off signals to all planets, all galaxies, and even dimensions that affects them. And that was like a big sort of I don't know what you want to call it, but a signal for us to say, oh, the kids found the matches is the way they looked at us because really we're very primitive in that sense. I think the technology that we now have, we're not careful enough and we're not mature enough for it. What do you say about that?
there are technologies, some known to the general population and some highly secret, certain dark groups of humans are keeping for themselves, that can be quite harmful if misused. We have to be careful. Nuclear fission is not the only thing we have to worry about, but it's like so many things, even like our environment. If you treat it with respect and use it for good purposes, all is well. If you abuse it or use it for bad purposes or try to violate the natural order of things and cause large ripple effect damage in the environment, that's not good. Again, we are fairly smart and intelligent, but it's how we use our intelligence that tells us whether we are truly an advanced species or not.
Let me ask you this. Have you yourself ever seen an ET craft?
Oh, yes.
Up close and personal? Like, I mean, within 100 feet or so?
How about within 45 feet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Seriously, that's now I've always thought this, and Preston Dennis says this too, that when we see craft, they're always going to or coming back from an abduction. Did you, in fact, when you saw this craft, was it passing by you? Did it come to you because you sent off some sort of signals or knew who you were? Or did it take you and did you have contact?
Well, I've had a number of contacts. Let me just pick one where the craft was there that I wasn't expecting, and it was there to do some good work. I was exploring Area 51 before most people knew about it, and I was along the extraterrestrial highway, Nevada 375, late at night, looking for ways to get into the base that weren't on regular maps. I had some geodetic survey maps. And this, of course, was highly dangerous. And the star visitors were watching me and I would say watching over me. And this was near Rachel, Nevada. And they decided to demonstrate that they were in a kind of watchful, close, but not on top of me kind of I will say, guardian kind of role. And I'll give you two instances of that. One of which was I was near the little alien at Rachel late at night, and I saw this
You mean
thing that,
little ale in Rachel, Nevada, right?
yeah, yeah. So I saw this thing that kind of looked like a semi, except it didn't. It's really garishly lit up, and it pulled up close, and then I looked more carefully at it, and it changed shape, and it was like the whole length of the truck or semi was compressed to about the size, about one sixth size, and it was mostly just grill and headlights and cab and nothing else. And I just looked at that, what's going on here? How can the truck suddenly become this thing? And it's really lit up and glowing. And then it just went on down the highway and let me know I was not alone, that there was some protection there. After that, I went to the part of the highway where Groom Lake Road takes off and goes to the Area 51 base. Long, maybe 30-mile dirt road. So I turned off there and started to drive in, and there's a place there where the guards are staked out and won't let you go any farther. I was getting towards there when this light came down the highway and pulled in behind me. It was the Zetas and their craft, and then it came down the dirt road a little bit, and then it stopped and paused, and then it turned around, went back out. Now, this is inference and conjecture, if you will, but I thought that the Zetas were pulling a little deception done for the Area 51 guards. They saw me stop there, and then this light came down the road a ways, stopped, and then turned around and went out. And that they were setting it up so the guards who were many miles away looking through binoculars would figure I'd give it up and gone back to the highway and drove off. Whereas I had my lights on, I was secretly staked out watching anti-gravity craft tests, and was successful in doing so, which I subsequently reported to the UFO community.
MUFON in Newfork?
Several UFO magazines that no longer exist, but were quite large and widely read in those days. Yeah, that kind of literature. It made international coverage.
Here's a question for you from Philip Blair. What are they doing in Antarctica?
Well, that's a kind of general question. I assume you're talking about extraterrestrials.
Yes.
Extraterrestrials have their presence in every continent on Earth. There's nothing special about Antarctica. People try to create a myth that there's something woo-woo, very secret about Antarctica, but there's nothing special there. There's no quote unquote secret alien base. There are places that the star visitors use to kind of as temporary location points when they're down on Earth doing studying things and seeing what's going on. They're not really bases in the sense of permanent residences, but just kind of temporary resting stations, and those exist in places all over the Earth and reported as such. Because Antarctica is a very different kind of continent, covered with snow and cold and hardly inhabited at all, it gets kind of exotic in people's minds, and they think something exotic must be going on there. But to the extent that the star visitors have temporary locations there, well, so they do in Asia and Africa, U.S., North, South America, Europe. I won't say quite so what, but there's nothing super exotic that's terribly important going on in Antarctica.
Let me ask you this. If if Bob Lazar, which I believe is telling the truth, and I think what's your first of all? Let me ask you this: what do you think about Bob Lazar? Do you think he's telling the truth?
I think he's telling the truth as best he knows it. I think he was fed a smidgen of this information, but Bob's a pretty smart guy, and most of what he talks about is just, physics and science and stuff he saw for himself. He may have read some briefing books about stuff that's going on in other places besides S4 and Area 51, where he was, that may have some details that aren't quite right. Some of those briefing books were given to workers at Area 51 and S4 for the purpose of giving them a combination of true stuff and false stuff so that the workers could be, if they ever got out of line, they could be shown to be telling things that aren't true. It's a way to kind of control people doing classified work. But I thought Bob Lazar basically described as best he could things like the power system of the copycat anti-gravity craft that the U.S. was trying to engineer from parts recovered from crashed extraterrestrial space vehicle.
Now, the reason why I brought him up is because he talks about the fact that we have undergone 63 external corrections. And you mentioned Humans 2.0 and Humans 3.0 or Star Kids 3.0, etc., etc. What about the fact that we are undergoing a 64th correction right now?
64 what, please? I didn't catch that.
A 64th correction update on our bodies.
Well, I don't know where Bob got that from. I not seen much recent from him personally, so I don't know what that is referring to. He's trying to say that I don't know what he's trying to say. I gave you the broad outline of the stair steps of human development from Homo sapiens 1.0 to 3.0. If people say, well, there's been additional development, well, yeah, some refinement of the recipe to a less dramatic degree has continued, and people are taking the hybrid star genetics that they have some of in their human genome and doing things with it that are more facile and forward than in times past. So I don't personally try to even assign numbers to that because there are so many different people with star seeds and star kids and different levels of development, and some trying to develop the powers and some not. I just wouldn't know what to make of such a classification system.
Here is a good question from Philip Blair. What can you tell us about the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah? Good question.
Not much. I read the same stories in the UFO magazines as you did. Most of it's conjecture and hearsay and stories. The guy who bought that is a pretty dark figure who has a lot of bucks and is trying to get a handle on extraterrestrial technology for his own purposes. So that part of it is pretty creepy. We don't need that technology in the hands of people whose motives are questionable. But
When you mean dark figure, are you
no,
talking about Bigelow?
yes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. For a while, he was giving
You know,
interviews.
Cabal,
The
does that
Cabal.
mean anything to you?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. The Cabal that's running us. They're running the whole planet.
And I'll tell you two people that are up in there. They sponsored the MIT Abduction Study Conference. They were trying to get all the, and I was at that too, as a speaker. They tried to get all the experts on abduction, as they called it. I'll say star visitor contact, and what it does, and what are the results of it. They wanted to get all that information so they could use it to become more powerful. And the people that financed that conference were two people, Bob Bigelow and Prince Hans Adam of Liechtenstein, probably one of the richest guys in the world.
Huh. I didn't know that. I knew about Bigelow, but I didn't know about the Prince.
Yeah, well, so this was a cabal operation, and those of us went to MIT for a learned conference to share what we knew. We thought that was on the up and up, but the cabal financed it and tried real hard. Bigelow would not, well, Hans Adam stayed in the shadows, and Bigelow denied that he was financing it, but he was. And those of us who went there in good faith shared what we knew, and it weren't really, it was only most of the way through the conference that we found out that that stuff was done with cabal financing, and that the cabal were likely trying to harvest what was found there.
Here's a couple of questions for you before we run out of time, because we're literally getting close to it. This is from Lasha Senyuk. Are any human starseeds on other planets? Very good question, because I've personally always thought that humans, Homo sapien humans, are living on other planets, myself.
Well, I can't say for certain. I will tell you this. We have humans in near space in U.S. manufactured spaceships. The Solar Warden fleet. We have a small base on the moon staffed by human folks operating in that space. We have a tiny station on Mars staffed by humans. So to that extent, there are humans in space. Whether there are humans in other planets, I don't know. I haven't seen any reports of that, and the technology to pull that off is not entirely evident at this point. And where would you go if you went to Jupiter? Step out of your craft and you sail through miles and miles of gases down to a core.
You got the planets, though, right? You got Europa.
Well, the moons.
The moons. Not the planets, moons,
yeah. Technically, it's possible for humans to be on other planets' moons in our solar system. but I haven't heard of it.
Real quick before I ask you the next question, for those that are not familiar with Solar Warden, can you explain what Solar Warden is?
Sure. And if you want to get the whole thing, go on my website, drboylan.com, and then do /US spacefleet.html. That will. Solar Warden is a code name for a secret international space fleet run by the Naval Network Space and Warfare Command, a nominally U.S. but basically transnational organization that has various assignments, including operating the International Human Space Fleet, with assignment to patrol near space, obviously our orbital space and farther out, and Star Nation does patrolling of beyond that for the rest of our solar system. If there were some wayward renegade group from some star system that wanted to come in and cause trouble, the Star Nation's patrol fleets would detect them and send them on their way. But they have given us, meaning the member nations that run and staff our human Starfleet, permission and assignment to patrol and protect Earth and orbital space and near space, Moon, Mars, such.
And actually,
So,
isn't Gary McKinnon the guy who the Brit who hacked into, was it the Navy, and found
yes,
off-planet or non-terrestrial ships and even non-terrestrial officers? Isn't that where the Solar
yes,
Warden came from?
exactly. We should honor Gary McKinnon's research, if you want to call it that, hacking, but hacking with a purpose.
Yeah.
Our fleets are staffed by Navy Space Cadre and Marine Corps Space Cadre. They recruit from all the member nations that are part of the coalition of nations that staff this and help build the ships. And so secretly, U.S. is already operating its own little Star Trek fleet. Too bad they don't think that should be made public, and we're all paying for it, so I don't know why, but they seem to think we can't handle the truth. So anybody out there listening who thinks they can handle the truth, get a hold of your congressmen and senators and tell them we can handle the truth.
It's not, the 30s with the Orson Welles War of the Worlds broadcast. I think we are able to handle it. There's not going to be the mass panics that there were then. People are far less religious. People are far less open with their minds. And more people in the younger generation absolutely believe without a doubt that we are not alone. Now, before the show ends, there is one more question that is in the chat that I have to ask you. This comes from Philip Blair. It says, John Keel talked about window areas. What distinguishes a window area?
Window area?
Window area.
I'm not familiar with that phrase or what it's trying to describe. Can't help you there.
That's okay. Neither am I, but this is the time I'm going to ask you if you have one final statement for everybody, what would it be? And after that, please plug in your website, books, and anything else.
Okay. Well, as I alluded to earlier, I'm going to be a little less coy. There's a big effort going on involving me and my team and people of goodwill in various progressive governments, particularly in their military intelligence levels and elsewhere, to bring this out in the open. There are people inside the military intelligence community, particularly, that are just as fed up as you and I are with the cover-up of UFO reality. I think it's high time we bring this all out in the open. And what I alluded to, do this formally, invite representatives from Star Nations to meet with the UN President and the head of the NJ-12 Transnational Committee to handle Star Visitor matters, and have dialogue. Everybody satisfy everybody. That we're peaceful, friendly, and grown up, and we can get along and work out the details and develop a treaty of peace and friendship between the United Nations and Star Nation. And then invite representatives from Star Nations to come down and hold workshops and schools and let us see, us humans see what they know and show them what we have in our culture. Cultural exchange missions, if you will. And the more people ask for that, ask publicly, create political pressure, the more likely it is to happen soon. There are powerful forces behind the curtain that would like to stop this. I talked about the cabal. It's a transnational group of baddies that like to pull strings and control things internationally using great wealth and political power. They have people placed in very sensitive positions that are really working for them. And so they're trying to put the brakes on as hard as they can. And some of us who would like to see the human race grow up are trying to put the gas to the floor as hard as we can. And that's where we are, both sides pedal to the metal. So who's going to prevail? Well, if we make more noise than they do, we will prevail.
Amen. Well said. And what's your website one more time? drboylan.com, right?
Yes. Yeah, drboylan.com. Tons of information on there. You read it from one end to the other, you'll know more than any of the U.S. presidents have known on this matter. Also, I will be giving a talk at a conference in Laughlin, Nevada, on November 1, 2, 3, that I'm inviting everybody to come to. It'll be a bunch of us there.
Paola Harris is event, right?
Yeah, Grant Cameron and a bunch of folks. You'll know lots of them. It's at the, what do I want to call it there? The
Aqua, for some reason, Aqua comes into mind.
Aquarius,
there we go.
Aquarius Resort. It's right on the Colorado River there in Laughlin, Nevada, November 1, 2, 3. You can go to starworksusa.com and get all the details. So I'm one of the key speakers there. And so that and the Red website, I have 5 books. They're on the website. One of them is totally there. You can download the whole thing for free and read it. The others, if you can find them, that's great. One is for sale from Amazon. So check those out if they interest you. And keep yourself well informed, because this is the generation that's going to see star visitors on television, star visitors shaking hands with human representatives, and we're heading into a whole new era where this is no longer disinformation and smokescreens, but interstellar reality.
Amen to that. And just like you said, they're going to be shaking hands with representatives. They'll be walking right amongst us on side street or sidewalks or anywhere else on this planet. With that being said, Dr. Boylan, it's been a true pleasure to have you back on. Everybody listening, I hope you understand the gravity of having him back on. He is a legend, a great legend, and I'm happy to call him my friend. I also want to thank all the people that are in the chat, especially my moderators. Thank you. And I want to thank even Steven for your super chat question. Our super chat comment. Not question, even comment, even better. Remember, folks, anything to keep the machine running, hey, it's all the best, because all I've been doing, if I actually took this, it hit me like almost like a lightning strike, where I realized I had done more than 500 different interviews. Think about that. 500 2-hour interviews. That's a lot, considering I'm not even 40 yet. Yeah. I'll be 40 in a couple months, but the point is that many in this short span. Well, let's just see what's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years, folks. So, with that being said, remember, the only thing you need to remember when you want to find me is the name of my show, Dr. J Radio Live. That is DRJ Radio Live. Everything from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, especially YouTube. These are the things I pay attention to the most, is YouTube and Twitter. And if you don't have a Minds account, MINDS, please open one. It's called the new Facebook. People call it the Facebook migration. It's open source, it's uncensored, and it pays you in cryptocurrency. How much better can you get than that? Sure, you can't really trade the Ethereum tokens for much. I think they're about 50 to 55 cents each. But the point is you finally have something where you're not going to be censored by the mainstream. Which here, I can't even mention the president's name, for crying out loud, or anything like that. This is very, very bad, the way YouTube has gone. YouTube once was the pinnacle of where you can bring your information, but it seems to me like certain channels are allowed to say what they want, especially if they mention AOC, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, which gets some, millions of views or things like that. But when it comes to information like Dr. Richard Boylan, they try to suppress us. And I don't understand why. I really don't understand why. Well, anyhow, I also want to tell you all to please keep your eyes in the sky, and remember, disclosure is in your hands. Please be active. Don't just be passive researchers or listeners. Take whatever skills you have and use them to get this topic out, just like Dr. Boylan said, that we, in a matter of time, we will have, star visitors on TV meeting with Congress and the Senate, and they'll be walking right amongst us on our sidewalks. All that's going to be in our lifetimes. I truly believe so. Right before his death, Stanton Friedman even said that. It's almost a premonition, and it's sad because he said that, and that was the last radio show he ever did, which was right here. And then, unfortunately, he passed away. Very sad, but he did leave us with an astonishing message, and that's why when I mentioned today we have a legend, Dr. Richard Boylan. He is a true legend. He's pioneered in ufology far, far more than a lot of other people have. So, Dr. Boylan, I have to thank you very much for appearing again today.
Well, thank you very much. You've been very courteous, and help move a very high-quality discussion along, and appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Again, the pleasure is all mine, and I want to thank all those people who were asking questions. Clearly, the people who were asking questions and even comments between each other are and were very engaged in this topic. Now, with that being said, folks, I have to officially sign off. We'll catch you Monday unless I do a special stream over the weekend. Starseed. Yes, I'm calling you out publicly. We have to talk. You have my number, or someone in the Hangout does. Rock, if you have it, give it to Starseed because Starseed's story needs to come out. AKA, see, we're talking about Starseeds, or we were the entire show, Starseeds and Star Kids, with Dr. Richard Boylan, and we have a username Starseed who's also one of my moderators. So that right there is a little hint of what's to come. I I I have to say this, folks. Literally, a lot of listeners have to happen to be people who have been taken and have had contact. And I've had some of the most amazing interviews with those people who never have shared their story before until they started talking because they finally found a safe community, which is here. So, again, I want to thank you all. I want to thank iHeartMedia, UPRN, and everybody else involved in running this machine. And please do check out Dr. Boylan's website. A lot of great information. And if you can, please go to Laughlin November 1st through 3rd for Paulo Harris's event. Again, starworksusa.com. And now I am going to sign off. I've said that 3 times, but